I'm trying to figure out how to use my 1K tone. I just love doing the show. This show is f***ing awesome. Isn't that great? Live, I can create a little beat for myself. Anyway, it's time to do this. Let's go. Yeah! Oh, yeah, feel free to grunt.
Bring it. Come on.
Welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show. Wow, we're here. You're here. That's the important thing. My name's Chris Curran, and this show, well, we usually do it weekly, but sometimes these days I'm taking a week off. So if you see on a Thursday that there's no new Podcast Engineering Show session, then you might have to wait a week. But on this show, we talk about podcast production, the actual hardcore technical aspects to podcast production. We talk shop is really what we do with podcast producers and engineers and other specialists. I have a background in audio engineering in the music business, and since I entered podcasting 6 or 7 years ago, I've noticed a huge lack of audio skills in podcasting, and that's where this show can help, because you'll learn a lot, and you can also ask great questions, and me and my guests can help answer them too. So, and if you implement the best of what you learn here, your podcast will sound a lot better, and you'll spend less time producing them. You know, time is an issue, right, Chad?
Yes, so much of an issue.
I mean, it's like every podcaster, it's like, well, first of all, every podcaster wants to start like 9 new shows every week. It's like, right? You have all these ideas, and it's like, I have this idea for a new show, and then as soon as you think about, oh my God, I'm going to have to record it and edit it and mix it, and it's like
we've got prospective sponsors, which is awesome, coming to us with like show ideas, and we're like, we're good, right? We've got a good set of shows right now. We don't want to hit saturation too quick, but yeah, no, time is our show. It ranges because we do a few different shows, but our weekly show, which is generally our longer show, goes anywhere from 40 to about 45, 50 minutes. And to be able to produce that show, that takes a good amount of time.
All right. Well, first, before I introduce my guest, whose voice you're already hearing, I want to ask Barry. Of course, Barry's with me. He's the maintenance guy in my old building. And, sometimes he flies out to Colorado and he just hangs out with me. He sits here in the studio. I set up a mic for him. I set up the Sennheiser E835. That's his mic. And so, Barry, what are Chad and I gonna need in this session to really have a nice chat and provide really good information and conversation for the listeners? What are we gonna need?
You're gonna need a couple of horses or a couple of mules.
Okay. Well, see, Barry, sometimes I have a couple horses and a couple mules hanging around, but today I don't, unfortunately. So Chad Sowash, you are here with me. Welcome, brother. You are the host and producer of the Chad and Cheese podcast.
Yeah, co-host, and I do all the dirty stuff on the back end, all the production and all the quote unquote fun stuff.
Yes. All right. So chadcheese.com is the website, and obviously the link will be in the show notes. So, and your show is tell us about your show real quick.
So our show is called HR's Most Dangerous Podcast. HR is boring as hell, right? We're a couple of veterans in the HR recruiting technology space. And we just let it fly. So it's an explicit, don't let the kids listen type of podcast. And we tell it how it is. And that's exactly what the HR industry needs, obviously, because our listenership is exploding.
Wow. So really, you actually, curse and everything like that?
Oh, dropping F-bombs every now and again. I mean, it's just like any industry. There's stupidity that happens. Right now, we see a ton going on the technical side of the house, which is really fun for me because I love new technologies. Everybody's talking about AI and machine learning and blockchain, and it's all just, in most cases, BS. So, I mean, we have a show where we can call BS on it, and people love it.
Right. HR is one of those funny, well, because when I had a couple sort of corporate jobs, like HR was always like a little weird. It's like the HR department, like they're always trying to be like your best friend.
Yeah.
But then literally as soon as you're fired or let go, they're like your worst enemy. It's just a weird thing sometimes.
Yeah. No, it's weird. And it's always, kind of like the, watch what you say, watch how you say it and that kind of thing. And our podcast is really the antithesis of that. So it's fun. And it's obviously something that the industry wants.
That's cool. So you worked in radio for a few years. So you had a lot of what you called practical on-the-job training in terms of audio and radio, which is great because you get to see how radio works and you can apply that to podcasting. So I want to do the speed round right now. I want you to take us through your standard, average episode. Take us through from you're literally about to hit record. So tell me, what, who's there, what participants are there, what mics are using, where the mics are plugged in, and the whole signal chain through into the computer and recording, and then quickly, what software you use to edit, like just overview the entire process all the way to the MP3 real quick.
Okay. So first thing we do is we plug in the handy dandy ATR 2500 USB mic, which has been pretty awesome for us. I have one and Joel has one, and we, he's my co-host, Joel Cheeseman. We plug those into our computers and then we both log into Zencaster. At that point, we'll go through kind of the show notes and talk through some things, and then we'll hit record. So I have a new Microsoft Surface laptop, and he has an old jalopy like MacBook that's like 8 years old or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So we've got different types of technologies. He's an Apple guy. I'm a Windows / Google Droid guy. But anyway, so we do the Zencaster thing. After we're done with the show, then what we'll do is I will actually, instead of having Zencaster do their post-production because it really sucks these days, I will download both of our tracks and then I will do post-production on Audacity. So I use Audacity to do post-production, all of that, add things here and there, take out whatever I need to.
Right.
And then it's ready for the show at that point. And then I push it over to Joel. He uploads it onto his servers. Then which obviously goes into our RSS feed. And then that feeds everything from iTunes to Google Play and all the other, wherever you get your podcasts.
Right.
And then we also upload to SoundCloud. And we use SoundCloud for our player on our website. So chadcheese.com, you go there, click on listen. We've got really just like a blog page setup for all of our actual podcasts.
Right.
And we have a sponsor who does transcription. And I thought at first it would be really cool just from the standpoint of individuals with disabilities who are hard of hearing or even deaf, and they want to enjoy the show. They can do that through transcription. Not to mention from an SEO standpoint, it's really awesome as well.
That's kind of cool, actually. So you have a sponsor for the show, and I'm assuming, we have
several.
Okay, so the one that does the transcription, though, so do they pay you money or they just do the transcription?
Well, they pay us money to do the transcriptions. Yeah, so we go through rev.com right now. And if anybody has any ideas on transcription services, I'd be more than happy to hear those. We've tried Trent. That's not quite, from my standpoint, ready for the big leagues yet. But rev.com seems to do a really good and very accurate job.
Right? That's cool, because I met the guys from rev.com at NAB, and I'm actually working on, right now, they're creating a sort of like a podcasting guide, and they asked a few different experts from the industry to be involved and participate. So I'm going to be involved in that, which is very cool. Great.
That's cool.
Great people. And apparently they haven't been around that long. I think he told me they've been around for like 8 months, and they're already the biggest transcription service on the planet.
It's smart, and I mean, you take a look at something like that, and that you're really having human beings doing transcription. So you have to ask yourself, is this scalable? I mean, right out of the gate, when you're taking a look at business models, is it scalable? Yeah, it's a great idea, but is it scalable? But apparently it is, and apparently they have enough people to be able to turn around transcriptions on a podcast like ours. I mean, we do several podcasts. We don't just do one a week, but that's our biggest one, and they can turn that around in 24 hours easily. So they do a really good job. One of the reasons why we went over to Trent was just to check it out. They have the natural language processing piece that's in there, which is really cool. But again, it's just not ready for prime time to be able to associate specific people's names to what they're saying in most cases. It's just not ready yet.
All right, so you got the ATR 2500 USB mic. That is, in podcasting, we talk a lot about the ATR 2100, which is probably the most popular mic, and that's a handheld mic. But the 2500 is not a handheld. You have it on a little stand, and it's almost shaped like it's not shaped like a handheld, but it's an end fire mic, so you talk into the end of it, correct?
Yep.
And so now, do you guys have any guests on your show ever, or is just you two?
We do a couple of different things. We go to conferences and we do interviews at conferences and things like that. And we use the mics, and they seem to work well. I have to do a good amount of post-production to be able to reduce noise, to normalize, compress, and those types of things when we're not on site like in our houses. But when we have guests who are I guess you could say calling in through Zencaster, we just send them a link, and then everything just works nice and clean that way. They generally don't have as clean of audio as Joel and I do because of the mics that we have. So I have to do a little bit more cleanup on them. But in most cases, it's definitely not as much as when we're at a conference, because there's just a ton of ambient noise and whatnot that you have to get rid of.
So what mic did you say that your co-host Joel has?
It's the same one.
Oh, it is. Okay. And now when you go on site, what microphone are you using on site?
Generally, they're these. We sit down with our laptops, and we have the mic, and we sit at a table, and we just interview them. And again, the sound quality at first isn't great, which means there's a lot of post-production that needs to be done. And I've learned some tips and tricks through Audacity to be able to make it much cleaner and much quicker to be able to make it much cleaner. So usually sometimes if it's just Joel or I, it's not both of us, then we'll just do audio on our smartphones, and that cleans up pretty well too.
Okay, so when you're on location, like let's say you're at a conference and you let's say it's you and you have an interview guest, you actually record both your voices with your ATR 2500.
Yep.
Okay. Now, does the ATR 2500 have different pickup patterns? Does it have like a omni and cardioid, and can you switch that, or is it just one pickup pattern?
Well, the way that we have it set up, and because it is kind of like the end fire, is we will point it and kind of sit close to the person when we're having the conversation, not too close because that's awkward. But we will point it back at us, and it does pick up the best through the end, but everything else, even if Joel is across the table, it picks up pretty well too.
All right. Actually, I just looked it up, and this is a side address microphone. So you speak into the side of it, and it's a condenser, which means it's very clear, and it picks up probably more background noise than a dynamic mic. But if you're in a quieter space, the condenser will be more clear and like articulate sounding. And it's also cardioid pattern. So if you're sitting close to your guest and you sort of have it pointed at both of you, then it would pick up both of you pretty equally. So that's cool. So that's on location. So are you like particular about the space you're recording, or are you like, because when you're on location, you can be in a quiet room, or you can be like on the floor of a noisy trade show. Where do you try to record?
It doesn't matter to us. It really has to do with trying to get the best guests on our show. And if that means we have to go down to their booth to actually have a discussion, then we'll do that. So yeah, we'd rather have them come up and be in a room and talk through things with them. But just as long as the ambient kind of noise that's happening behind you doesn't drown out the person, and I have to do a heck of a lot of work in trying to reduce the noise on the track.
Right.
I'm game.
Cool. So all right, you're using Zencaster, and
Yep.
I assume, like the rest of the world, for the last few months, you've been having a few problems here and there, right?
Yeah, I mean, mainly on the auto drift side of the house, which is one of the reasons why we do post-production. We used to do it directly through Zencaster.
Right.
And I mean, we have a good amount of sponsors, right? So we don't just have one sponsor. We have 3 sponsors for one show, and then we've got 3 other sponsors for other various shows. So QA/QC is big because this is a product, right? We want to make sure that it's clean. We want to make sure that the auto drift isn't happening and that we're talking over each other.
Right.
So yeah, we've had to put a bit more QA/QC in, and we use Audacity to be able to do post-production.
Right. So QA/QC, by the way, for everyone listening, if you're not aware, is quality assurance and quality control, and that's more of a corporate term, right? Where like at corporations, they usually have people who literally their job is to just quality control, make sure look around at things and make sure everything is correct. And so what you're saying is that you really take time after the recording, you take time in post-production to make sure it's lined up, because there's nothing worse than like people talking over each other and things being drifted a little. Because it doesn't make sense to the listener, right?
No, yeah. It's garbly at that point. And it frustrates the listener, and it frustrates the hell out of us because we did the work on it, and obviously the sponsor, because they're paying for a clean product.
Right. Barry, what do you think about when tracks are recorded and then they sort of drift and then there's people talking over each other? What's your reaction to something like that?
It's a mess.
It's a mess.
Barry's concise, man. Barry's concise.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right. So Zencaster, and we were talking before the show, but and we're trying Squadcast right now, which I did on the last session of the show with Arik Levy. Yeah. So we're trying Squadcast, but Zencaster is still my go-to with my clients and everything. For now. And lately, Zencaster for me has been totally fine. Like, I actually haven't heard that clicking noise in a while, and I'm really happy about that. So, all right, you're using Audacity, which is cool. You like that?
I do. I mean, it has so many features. I mean, it's at first when you jump into it, I mean, it is overwhelming because there's so many features to it. There's so much that you can do with it. It's a very powerful product, I think. So I had to take some time going into YouTube and reading through some of the documentation and just try to find the tricks and tips on how to clean up and make our tracks just, again, more clean overall and better sounding overall.
Right. Okay, so we'll talk about editing in a minute, but you're also using a Windows Surface laptop. Now, I don't know what that is. I mean, I've heard of a Windows Surface, but I thought that was almost like a tablet.
Yeah, this is the laptop version, and it is awesome. My wife has, and she always flaunted it for a while. Oh, look, I've got a Microsoft Surface. Look, and so my old jalopy of a computer died after I've had it for like 7 years. It was a laptop, and so I went and I bought the newest Microsoft Surface laptop because I like laptops. I'm not a big fan of the whole tablet thing. And now she is so envious. This thing is sleek. It is beautiful. It is powerful, and it has the touch screen and everything.
Oh my!
So yeah, it's interesting though. When I switched over from my old jalopy to this new Surface, is that's when we really started to see the auto drift start to happen on Zencaster. So I'm wondering if my computer's actually processing so much faster into Zencaster versus Joel Cheeseman's old jalopy itself. It was really weird.
Interesting. So I want to ask Barry. Barry, let's talk about the history of the Windows Surface. What can you say about the history and when it started and all that?
All right. First, the inkers.
Wait a minute, you're going all the way back to the Inkers? Wow, you're really going back in history, Barry. Okay. All right. Anyway, let's move on. I see it's hard, Chad, it's hard to figure out how to use some of these classic clips, Barry, do you think I do a good job with the clips here?
I don't think so.
Wow. All right. So,
okay, Barry.
All right.
So at least he's honest. I mean, he's
That's true. That's one thing you can say. All right, so you got the Windows Surface laptop, and let's talk about editing. So when you're doing post-production, if you have the separate Zencaster tracks, you're putting them side by side in Audacity, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so tell me your editing process. Do you go through and clean it up and tighten it up?
Yeah, usually when it's just Joel and I, and we're doing our weekly show, and we're both at our homes, it's kind of like a sterile setup, so we don't have a lot of ambient noise or anything like that. So there's not a ton of cleanup to do. I just have to go and make sure that things are aligned appropriately, the auto drift that's happening, fix all that. So that's fairly simple. But when we're out, really in the wild, I guess you could say, that's when I have to go into major editing cleanup mode. And at that point, I learned, and again, this is just through reading and watching YouTube, that if you go through kind of like my scrubbing process is to be able to go in and isolate where I can find noise patterns. And then, so isolate the noise patterns and then try to strip those from the entire track all the way through. And then don't do it too much though, because sometimes if you do it too much, it'll actually take some out of your own voice track itself, right, and it'll make you sound very tinny, and it'll make you sound robotic. And I did that a couple of times. I'm like, oh, there's noise, I'm going to take that out. Oh, there's noise, I'm going to take that out. And then I overdid it. And one of my guests literally sound like R2D2.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so that's a touchy thing there, that noise reduction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can go overboard. You can go overboard with that. And then, so after that, I noise reduction, then I normalize it through Audacity, and then I compress it. And there might have to be a couple of iterations or rounds where I have to go through normalization and then compression to be able to get to the types of levels that I want. And if everything's redlined out, then I have to reverse amplify it. So it's if you have any tips or tricks to be able to make that easier, I'd be more than happy to take those.
What exactly would you need help with in terms of normalizing and compressing? What's the issue you're having?
I'm getting it done, and it's actually happening much faster than what it used to. I'm trial by fire, right? But those are really my steps. So reduce noise. Go ahead, go through the noise reduction, normalize, compress. So those are my 3 steps when we're out in the wild and we need to clean up some tracks. Sometimes I have to go through and normalize and compress again and again, and then do a kind of like a reverse amplification. So I hit amplify and then maybe -2 or -3, whatever it needs to be able to get it out of the red. I feel like I've got it kind of toned down now, so I don't have to do a lot of kind of hunting and pecking throughout the different tracks. But if there are better and quicker ways to be able to make that happen, processes, what have you, I'm all up for it.
Yeah, so what you're doing with normalization and compression is good. You're getting the level right, you're compressing it, making it nice and tight. I would probably say you don't need to do the normalization and compression like multiple times each. So what you might want to do is just use the compression first, because compression will tighten things up. It'll bring down the loud parts a little bit and make the dynamic range a little less. Mm-hmm. So it'll be more easily heard and understood by people listening. If there's background noise, for instance, if someone's driving in a car, and if you have good compression on your podcast, even when people, sometimes when the people on the show talk loud, of course the person in the car can hear it. But then when people talk low and they start to really talk low like this, the person will still be able to hear them, because the compression will help that. So first, probably after, when everything's pretty much done, you could probably use some compression first and just compress it a little bit so it sounds good. And then use the normalization. And the normalization in this sense is really you're trying to bring the level up or down, but usually up. You're trying to make the level to the correct LUFS level, the loudness standard, which is -19 for mono and -16 for stereo. So I don't know. I don't think Audacity has a way to normalize to the loudness standard. I just don't think it exists in Audacity because that's like, I won't say it's like an advanced feature, but like,
yeah,
setting something to a certain LUFS level is different than just, well, it's very similar to normalizing, but it's probably a different algorithm. Because LUFS, and I've mentioned this before, LUFS is the loudness standard. It's like an LU is a loudness unit. Mm-hmm. And those loudness units are very close to RMS levels. So when you use any type of software and you talk about level, there's peak level, which the peak level is obvious. Where does the peak of the wave go up to, right? If the peak goes all the way up to 0, right, then the peak level is 0. But the RMS level is an average loudness. And that's very handy to know because that's how you can normalize a track or an episode to be a certain loudness. So RMS and LUFS are very similar. So maybe, perhaps even in Audacity, maybe you can set it to a certain RMS level if you can't set it to a certain LUFS level.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that out on the settings.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why RX6, I mean, I use it, and of course it's a little expensive, but it's just because you just open it up in RX6 and you tell it, okay, make this -16 LUFS. Boom. Uh-huh. And it just, processes it and boom, it's done. Very handy. But
nice.
Again, you don't need that, but I like that you're compressing a little bit. So do you know off the top of your head, like some of the settings you use for the compressor, like the ratio, like are you really compressing it a lot or just a little?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I read some of these settings and watched YouTube videos and so on and so forth, wrote the settings down, and then I set those as a default in it. So I didn't have to kind of play that game all the time.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Because, again, you don't want to use that much compression, right? You just want to use enough so it helps. You don't want to compress too much because then it sounds really weird.
Yeah.
It sounds unnatural. It can be distorted and it'll bring up breaths and noise. It'll bring up the noise. So if like you're using noise reduction as your first step, if the second step is compression and you compress it a lot, you're basically bringing up all that noise floor that you just suppressed.
Yep. And that's what happened too when I started going through compression first, and I was just saying, okay, let's take a look at compression, and then all that noise was just exploded. So I started doing some reading, and it said the first thing you need to do is isolate noise. Just don't get too crazy with it. That's just my tip. Don't get too crazy with taking all the noise out, because when you do, you're going to strip some things out of the actual voices. So just do a little noise reduction and then continue forward with your compression.
Yeah, and believe it or not, the best way to do noise reduction is to address it before you even record. So if you're at a trade show and you're on the floor, well, then you're going to hear all kinds of people talking in the background, and you're not going to you can't use noise reduction to get rid of people talking. Noise reduction is for like, a fan or an air conditioner or an air vent blowing air, those kinds of things, like just background, like almost like static noises or regular noises or whatever you want to call it. But in general, like even if, like, let's say it's your own house or Joel's house or something, like when you're about to record audio or you're going to sit in a room and record audio, before you start recording, you should actually just sit quiet and listen, and like you'd be surprised what you can hear. And obviously if there's like a big air conditioner, blowing right next to you, you can hear that. Right. But anyway, the key is, and this is with all audio production, the key is to capture the audio as best you can first. And you don't just want to capture any garbage audio and then try to fix it all later, because that's a recipe for early death and frustration. I mean, that'll just drive you nutty.
Yeah, it does. Stress in a ton of post-production. I remember we went on site and had a great conversation. And it was such a great conversation. And I came back and I started doing post-production, and I almost felt like I was going to have to throw it away. I mean, that's how bad it was. So this is where I really started doing some deep research on how to make it more clean. And you're right. I mean, right out of the gate, we have steps that we go through. Joel does at his house. I do at my house. Make sure the dogs are away. Make sure, everything is closed up. Everybody knows I'm podcasting, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's really important. It's really important to try to get that up front. But then to know that you can't dictate every situation. If you're going to get a really good interview, like we got a great interview with the head of Google pretty much hiring services in Dublin, Ireland. And we were at the Dublin storehouse, and we were all drinking Guinness, having a good time. And we're like, let's go find a corner and let's do an interview with him. And we did that. And that was probably the only time we were going to get an interview with him. And there was a ton of ambient noise. So we got it, and it was good. And we had a lot of cleanup to do on it, but you can't always dictate a sterile environment.
Right. All right. So then when you have it all leveled and stuff, then you obviously create an MP3, and you do that right from Audacity?
Yep. Right from Audacity. And then we throw it into Dropbox, where Joel grabs it. He uploads it up to his servers to create an RSS feed. And then everything just is driven off the RSS feed.
Right. So does he also tag, like put the MP3 tagging information onto the MP3?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And so when you say you're uploading it and creating your own RSS feed, are you using, a traditional service like Libsyn or Blueberry, or are you literally creating your own feed?
He is going through, I believe, WordPress to be able to create that feed. He's uploading it, and then it's coming back into WordPress, unless it happens before that. I mean, because that's kind of his side of the house.
Got it.
My side of the house is more on the production side.
Yeah, so probably what he's doing is he's using the PowerPress plugin, which is Blueberry created that. So I would assume you have some media hosting. I mean, unless he's just literally uploading the MP3 onto your web server, which is actually highly not recommended. But I mean, you can do it. You can do anything. But anyway, yeah, I mean, so you might want to just check on that. But I'm sure if that's his side of the, if that's his responsibility, I'm sure he's got it covered.
Yeah, no, I'll ask about that part. We run like a machine from the standpoint of, when we record, production, kind of my side. I know what I'm responsible for, and then I hand it off to him, and it really makes it a very symbiotic relationship. That's for sure.
Right. So I just realized you told me that you use a SoundCloud player on your website, and so I'm wondering if you're using SoundCloud to create your RSS feed, which you can do.
It could be. I'll ask him. I don't think he does. Okay. But he could. He very well could. And we do use SoundCloud. It's interesting. Just recently, it seems like Chrome has shut down the autoplay on on SoundCloud players, and from my understanding, from many of the other players that are out there.
Really?
Yeah, it's happening in Chrome, but it's not happening in Microsoft Edge. So we did some research on it and saw that like late last year, they were talking about shutting down autoplay. And for us, I mean, it's kind of like the listener experience. When they come to our website, they see the like little podcast ready, and they click the listen button. They expect to start listening to a podcast. Now they go to a page and they have to click a play button. So it's one of those things that we're trying to work through, but I don't know what kind of fix we're going to find for it if Chrome is shutting down the autoplay.
Interesting. I wonder, instead of them clicking listen and taking them to another page, I wonder if you could just embed the player right on that first page and just boom, hit play.
Yeah, that's what we used to do. And that might be the way that we do it. The thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to get more people not just to listen to it on the homepage because we have the transcription, to be able to drive them to the page that has really all of the show notes. And we have a ton of show notes, and then we have the transcription. So we want them to be able to have all that information and not just, click listen. So
yeah, totally.
We'll have to reconfigure somehow.
So the other thing about SoundCloud I wanted to mention, if you really are using SoundCloud to generate your RSS feed, one thing about SoundCloud that I figured out, and I don't know if they changed it. It's been probably a couple years since I researched this, but when you upload to SoundCloud, if you upload, let's say, a WAV file or an AIFF file, which uncompressed, huge uncompressed audio file, high quality, when you upload the WAV file, SoundCloud will turn that WAV file into an MP3, right? So, but the other thing is, if you upload an MP3 file to SoundCloud, I always thought that it would just use your MP3. Like it's already an MP3. It will just, it doesn't have to do any conversion, right? That's wrong. SoundCloud does. That actually re-encodes your MP3 to another MP3, which by definition is going to degrade that sound a little bit just through the conversion. So that's why for SoundCloud, it's always recommended to upload the uncompressed WAV files, not the MP3. So,
gotcha.
So I don't know what you guys are doing, but and you might want to check that too. Do they still do that? That's a hard one to find an answer on. I think I literally had to email their support back and forth a bunch of times before they understood what I meant, and then they finally did answer me. They had to get some technical person to answer me. Yeah. So because that's a bummer. It's like, dude, it's an MP3 already. It's fine. I created it. Can't you just use that MP3? And they're like, no, we have to re-encode it into our MP3. Okay.
Yeah, it's hard. We've the whole autoplay scenario I was just talking about. I went into their community, posted a question, looking for response. I mean, it's they're not incredibly responsive, but again, it's one of those things that you have to work through.
Yeah. So, what have been some of your bigger learning experiences that you've had as producing podcasts?
Mainly the quality piece is the biggest piece, and I take a lot less time today than I used to, just because of the tips and tricks that I know. That has been really, I think, the biggest key to having better quality and actually having listeners reach out to us and say, you guys are sounding smooth. That is, and again, I am definitely not a professional. I do have a little background in production, but nothing on the professional side. But to have your listeners actually say, hey, you guys are sounding very smooth, in sync, sounding good. That's really a big thing for us. And just to take that time, because that time is probably the most important time beyond, the topics and whatnot, is if you're gonna take the time to research and do all that stuff and you sound like crap, then what does it even matter, right? Yeah. So the sound quality is incredibly, probably number one on the important scale.
Right. So what in the future, do you have any plans of upgrading your production, whether it's equipment or software? Do you have any plans to upgrade or any dreams of upgrading?
Yeah, I do. I've taken a look and I've seen some very good things about the Zoom, the handheld, and when we go to conferences and whatnot, having a really nice, high quality handheld. So we're looking at those. They're not inexpensive, but as we do more conferencing, which we have been a lot, I think that would be a piece of equipment that we would definitely invest in next.
Right. Yeah. So the Zoom H6 is a really nice piece of equipment. I think it's like $350, so it's not that bad. And you can plug in 4 mics, but if you get the 2 XLR add-on feature thing, you can actually plug in 6 XLR mics into the Zoom H6 and record 6 mics simultaneously, which is pretty cool. And it's small, it's handy, it's a pretty good recorder. I mean, the mic pre's are okay. I mean, you got to be careful sometimes driving, you got to be careful that you don't record the signal too hot, because it will sort of distort or limit it, and it just does some funny stuff when you start to get close to zero. So with Zoom, you got to just be a little careful about recording at a hot level, and that's unlike the sound devices Mix Pre 6 and Mix Pre 3, because those things have really good limiters and analog limiters, so you can really record at a hot level, and it'll be fine. Although you don't want to record too hot ever, but you definitely want to record at a strong, healthy signal to get the full benefit of all the bit depth and the sample rate.
Right.
All right, Zoom H6, that's a good one. What about microphones? Because the mic you're using now probably a good starter mic. But if you're, for instance, for your home setup, like when you personally, Chad, are at home with your computer and you're just connecting with people through your computer, like you could, eventually maybe get a nice like a almost like a broadcast mic, right? Like an RE20 or an SM7B or something like that. Did you ever think about upgrading like that?
Yeah, equipment is always something that we're thinking about. Just from a quality standpoint, like I'd said, we're sounding good with these kind of starter mics per se. So there's no question. We would love to take a look at upgrading the mic side of the house, but since we really don't have like that handheld conference mic, that's where I was thinking the Zoom would be first, and then take a look at kind of the equipment, different kind of upgrades of the equipment that we have now.
Right. Oh, so with the Zoom, you were thinking of, okay, because the Zoom can also it has left and right microphones. You can just hold it and, hold it between you and some other person and record it. That's one way you were thinking of using the Zoom?
Yeah. Well, again, being at conferences, just making it easier, not having to do a full setup, that kind of a thing, and getting some very good voice quality out of it.
Got it. Yeah, so technically you could get, like, for instance, a Zoom H6 and just put the attachment on the top, the little left and right attachment, and then when you're talking to someone, when you're standing there on the conference floor, you could just literally be holding up the Zoom H6 between you and your guest, and it'll pick up you both. It'll pick one person up more on the left and one person more on the right, which is actually kind of cool because you can adjust levels later if you really needed to. It's almost like recording each person on their own track, but not quite. It'll sort of be mixed together, but it'll sort of be a little, one person will be a little bit more on the left and one person will be a little bit more on the right. So that helps a little. The other way is to use the Zoom H6, but just get either one handheld mic or two handheld mics. So you can hold a mic close to your mouth, and then you can can have a second mic to hand the guest and say, hold this close to your mouth, and then you're recording. That's a much higher quality recording because you're really isolating each person's voice, and then you can manipulate it later.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah. One of the things when we're going through conferences and whatnot, we travel fairly lightweight. So, I think carrying around two mics in a Zoom, that would be definitely high quality. But I just think for the way that we travel, it probably wouldn't work.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's it. You got to fit the equipment to your preferences. So that's what you do.
Yeah.
So you figure it out. So if it's just holding up a Zoom H6 or a Zoom whatever, then that's it. And you know what? If you're on a conference floor, usually that's okay because people expect to hear background noise on a conference floor.
Yeah. And trying to cut a little bit of that out doesn't hurt either on post-production. You're not going to cut it all out. That's for sure.
Yeah. In a case like that, I would literally skip all compression. Like I wouldn't use any compression ever on if I recorded someone talking in a loud, crowded room, I would never use. And if you're trying to reduce the background noise, like you can't use compression because compression's gonna bring up the background noise. So,
yep.
So, one trick for that though is instead of using compression, you can, if there are times when someone gets really loud, like let's say they're talking normally, and you're on a conference floor and there's a bunch of background noise and they're talking normally, then all of a sudden they go, hey, and it's something really loud happens. You can use a limiter to tame that. So you can use a limiter, it'll crush that loud part, but it won't touch the rest of it. So
when it comes down to podcasting, I mean, I would assume podcasting very close to what you do on a broadcast from a broadcast standpoint. What do you do different, or do you do anything different when you're producing a podcast versus anything that's going out on traditional radio or what have you?
Well, what do you mean in terms of, well, radio, they usually do a lot of things live, but I guess they do pre-recorded segments for radio, right?
That, and also, commercials and those types of things.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's no difference. It's audio production. So that's it. You have human voices, you have music, you have whatever you want to have. And the thing is, you have to, record them and then mix them together properly so it's presented well to the listener. So in that way, fundamentally, there's no difference. You can record a piece of audio and they can broadcast it over the radio, or someone can download it onto their iPhone and listen on their earbuds to your show. And so yeah, there's really not much difference. I mean, obviously there are differences between radio and podcasting in terms of the industries and the delivery methods and stuff like that. But and compression, like radio, like when something goes out on the radio, like when it goes out on the air, it goes through like the final limiting and compression that radio does to the audio. And that does a good job of sort of crushing it into being really understandable to people who are driving in loud cars. So that's almost like a mastering step, that the way that radio does that last limiting and crushing the signal, that's what I do in terms of podcast production as a mastering step. And the mastering step I do, and it's also done in the music business, the mastering step is maybe a little multi-band compression and maybe slight EQ, like slight, because by the time you get to mastering, you shouldn't have to do anything drastic at all. Like it should be almost done. Mastering is like, it's like the cherry on top. It's just slight tweaks to make it a little louder, a little more poppin'. And so, yeah. And so that's why when I do my podcast production, I do a mastering step. So, and that sort of tightens everything up, makes it louder. And that also, the mastering step also includes the loudness. So that's the very last step, is to set the loudness properly.
Gotcha. So you have like limiters, and that's what you go off of from the loudness standpoint to make sure that nothing hits over that limiter.
Yeah. So I use a lot of compression along my production. So when I'm even when I'm mixing an episode, I will, on each voice, I'll use a compressor for each voice. Sometimes I use two compressors on a voice, like in series, just one, then it goes to the second compressor. And I, it's sort of gentle, but I do use compression. And then in the mastering step, I compress it more. So after all that compression, like there's not any peak that's really going to go very loud. It'll seem like if someone yells, it'll seem loud, but the level won't really go that loud. Like perceptually, it'll sound like they screamed and that it was pretty loud. But on the wave doesn't go up and distort, and you know what I mean? So compression is just taming everything, just keeping it so it doesn't peak. And so limiting is like extreme compression. Limiting is like it's like you put a line in the sand and the audio can't cross that line. Just you can't. It just hits the line and it stops.
Right. So how long does it generally take you, like a podcast like ours, how long does it generally take you to produce till the final?
So a show like yours with just you and Joel talking, right?
No, I'm just talking about like what we're doing right now.
What we're doing right now.
Will it take you to, yeah.
So after we record it, I'll assemble the tracks in my DAW. Well, first I'll clean up each track. So I'm going to take your track and bring it into RX6 and really, clean it up. I mean, I know you don't have a pop filter on your mic, so there's some plosive. So RX6 will just get rid of that. And if there's any hums, I'll get rid of that. If there's any low rumble, I'll get rid of that. And then RX6, I used to clean up everything. I can even use noise reduction in RX6. Anyway, after I clean up your track and my track, although my track is, pretty clean already. Because I have thousands of dollars in the signal chain. But yeah, so then I assemble everything in my DAW, which is I use Reaper. So then that's where I mix it. I add my music and I do this, and and then that's when I mix it. I make it sound good in Reaper, and I export it out of Reaper as a stereo file, and then I open it in RX6 again to level it, actually. And I master it in Reaper as well on the master bus. But anyway, no, the whole thing takes time. It takes me, and then I got to do my edits, and then sometimes I go through and just tighten everything up, but sometimes I don't. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, hours, 2-3 hours, 2 hours might be quick, 3 hours might be average. 4 hours might be if it's a long episode and there's problems, and I don't know, but probably not more than 4 hours.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, making me feel good. Making me feel good, because that's 4 hours is pretty much my limit at that point.
No, this stuff takes time. I mean, look, it's like anything. If you put in the time, if you gain the knowledge and get the right tools, and then put in the time, the final product will be a really nice product. And I on this show, it's I was thinking about it the other day. I don't really have the option to just sort of wing it and just put out an episode that sounds a little crappy. Like, I can't do that, right? Because I'm the guy who's trying to teach people how to sound good.
Yes, which means when this comes out, I will sound silky smooth. I appreciate that.
We'll see. I've been thinking about making short videos, and I've been having a lot of entrepreneurial ideas for podcast engineering school, and for this show, and for putting out a lot of content about helping people produce better audio. The problem is the time, right? I don't, creating content takes time. It's like people are like, oh no, just make short videos and put them out everywhere. It's like, do you realize how long it takes to make a short video? Does anyone? Mm-hmm. I mean, it probably takes to make a short video. Probably takes 8 hours.
Well, people today think that all you have to do is get your mobile phone, click, go to Facebook Live, right? or even YouTube, or whatever it is. And then, there's your video. It's already produced, and it's like, well, no, just from a quality standpoint, you have to go further, especially if you're doing something that you want people to subscribe to.
Yeah. Well, there is that, though. That in some cases, I think that's a valid argument. The fact that, hey, just grab your phone and do it. But what I want to do is like screenshots, and I want to show what I'm doing in certain software. And, like if I get, like I want to start, well, I'm not going to say it because I'm going to just do it. I'm going to, anyway, I'll announce everything when I'm starting to do it, but some really fun stuff with audio, and sort of like audio production mixed with like gaming. And it's
cool.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I want to do something cool. I just want to, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something.
Yeah. There are plenty of people that are out there doing stuff, right? It's all about finding that different kind of niche that people are looking for, and hoping that that's what you want to do. I mean, Joel and I did this podcast. I think it was more cathartic than anything else, because we see so much crap going on in our industry, and we just want to talk about it. And it turned into pretty much a business. So, I mean, go after what you love, but also know that just because you love it doesn't mean everybody else is going to love it.
Yeah, man, that's definitely true in podcasting. It's like people, I mean, I produce podcasts for a living, and a lot of clients, a lot of potential clients who come to me, they're like, "Ooh, I want to do a podcast," and it's like anything. They think that they can just start it, and all of a sudden they're going to have like 1 million listeners. It's like same with blogging. It's like, oh, people think, oh, I'll start a blog. Well, who's going to read it? Like, most blogs get no one reads it. Like, it's like everything. Yeah, no. Any content you create, it's not easy to get people to watch it or read it. So
yeah. It's all about how they engage today. And I think, with the advent of microblogging, with the advent of podcasting, I mean, I can go outside and mow my lawn and listen to a podcast, listen to several podcasts, right? I can listen to them during the day. I can do all these different things. So you can, trying to find the way to fit yourself into somebody's already busy day.
Yeah.
And to think that, somebody's going to sit and read your blog per se, and they could, if it's a really great blog, it's asking a lot. It really is in today's society.
Right. And the other problem is if people tune into Ralph M. Rivera's podcast, Barry, what did you hear when you tuned into Ralph M. Rivera's podcast?
There's no activity, no giggle, no nothing.
No nothing. Wow. No giggle.
Nothing.
All right. Anyway, Chad Sowash, this has been awesome, man. Your show is the Chad and Cheese podcast because your co-host and partner is Joel Cheeseman. And your website is, chadcheese.com. And so anything cool coming up on your show in the immediate future?
Yeah, I mean, we've got some, and again, if you're in HR, recruiting, if you like technology, there have been some very big moves in the industry. As a matter of fact, last night there was a huge acquisition in our industry. So there's a lot to talk about. It's really fun. And you can't say that about HR and recruiting, really. Really, it's kind of boring. We liven it up. So give it a listen.
Well, Chad, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. And you know how we end the show. You have to yell, sound great. Not yet, though. We'll wait till the music, right when the music's about to kick in. And before that, I just want to tell you, thank you for listening to the Podcast Engineering Show. Check out all our previous sessions. There's been a lot of great sessions, and I'm going to do some more solo sessions in the near future. I'm going to do a lot more in the future. But anyway, podcastengineeringschool.com. And you know what? I'm going to stop that because I want to just mention that the next Podcast Engineering School is going to start on June 26th. See, I always forget to I didn't even mention it yet, right? We're over an hour in. I didn't even promote the one thing I'm supposed to promote. Anyway, Podcast Engineering School is starting on June 26th. So there's a special price up there now on podcastengineeringschool.com. If you ever wanted to produce podcasts at a professional level and become a real podcast engineer in terms of being a professional and being able to produce top-notch shows that sound really good and maybe even get some clients and maybe even make a living doing it, well, Podcast Engineering School, that's what I teach people. So, all right, Chad, so we're going to yell right here. Sound great!
Sound great!
Yeah!
To walk away from me where and you can play that part so well. Why do you play it out on me now? You like to lose control where it's quite a feeling, isn't it? Let them float and rift in time now. You tell me that you found something better. respond. Oh yeah,